That's right. It's right there, it's on Service Road behind.
Ready when you are. Oh, yeah. All right, welcome everybody. So, my name is Steven Snell from MSA Professional Services. My name is Steven Snell from MSA Professional Services. I'm here with Joe Martirano. I was a project engineer for the past 2 years on planning and design of the wastewater treatment facility. So we're here to talk about the design status, where we're at, kind of what the history was and how we got to the point we are tonight. So we set up a special 1 hour meeting so that we didn't get into the council meeting, take too much time, so you can ask questions if you have questions on where the design is at, and kind of give you an overview of what we did. So past 2 years, the first year, 2023 to 2024, we did a facilities plan. So that's a DNR mandated plan to go over what upgrades a treatment plant would need. We submitted that to the DNR, got approval then to begin preliminary design on the project. So last fall, we started doing some on-site scanning of the buildings, some soil boring testing, did a lot of assessment of things we had to do before winter came and we couldn't do it because of the outside conditions. This spring, we then began doing a lot of the design of the wastewater treatment plant upgrade based on the recommendations that were in the facilities plan from a year ago. And we currently sit here at September of 2025, where for a Clean Water Fund grant opportunity for the city, a submittal needs to be made with the design to go to the DNR so that you can get approved for any funding grant options available to you for next year. I believe the city would be eligible up to $3.1 million of grant. It's not fully guaranteed, but in the past, we have seen most municipalities, especially one in your condition with an aged facility and needing to meet new permit regulations, being able to achieve that full 3.1, depending upon what the state has available and allocated to them. So we're currently sitting here in September. We need to submit that by the end of the month. We have the full plan set and specifications ready to go to DNR. So the council meeting tonight will have that in the agenda for approval. Once we get approval, we can submit as early as tomorrow morning to get to the DNR. Then the status of the project at that point is up in the air with DNR being reviewing it, but the plan would be to also go to a bidding while the DNR is reviewing it. We've done this multiple times on facilities in the past. If the DNR does have any comments or questions on plans, that we can address that in addenda during the bid process. But we would like to recommend opening bids prior to Thanksgiving so that you get the best bid price from contractors as they're filling up their schedule going into 2026. So Joe, you want to keep going down here? So 2026, you could estimate construction to start sometime in early spring. As soon as frost is out, contractors will generally begin working on the paperwork process as soon as they get the contract awarded to them. So that could be as early as December or January. And then construction on this size of facility is probably going to last until the end of 2028. This is kind of the timeline. I'll pass it over to Joe here to talk a little bit more about the upgrades that are in the design and then how we got to that point and why we needed to do those design options for the city.
Yes, thank you. So I have probably like 7 or 8 slides that I'm going to talk through, and then we're going to have plenty of time for questions at the end of that. So what is this project that has been talked about for the past 2 years? So what we're looking at here is a map of the sewer collection system for your city. So those green lines that you see all represent gravity sewer that runs underneath every street basically in the city. And anytime you flush the toilet, you turn on your sink, you do laundry, the water from that ends up in those pipelines and ends up in this pink box down here, which is the city's wastewater treatment plant. It was built originally in like the mid-1950s. You had a major upgrade in the 1980s. You've done a few small things, but for the most part, everything that's there is from the 80s and is somewhere on the order of like 40 plus years old, which is great. Your facility has lasted a really long time and it's done a great job for you. And that, should not be lost in all this, okay? So you get about 500,000 gallons of water per day that goes through the green lines. In the middle of summer, when it hasn't rained for a while, that's probably closer to like 300,000. If we're getting 3-4 inches of rain, that could be up around 3 million gallons a day, okay? For perspective, city of Milwaukee is somewhere around like 160 million gallons a day. So when we talk about like the spectrum of treatment plants, you guys are on the smaller side, okay? And what's important is that all the water that goes through the pink box ends up in the Rock River and then goes downstream, okay? So the project is essentially a construction upgrade to your treatment plant to replace outdated infrastructure and to add new things that allow you to comply with regulations that the state DNR has decided you have to meet. Why do you have to meet what the DNR says that you have to meet? It's a complicated answer, but really there's a process determining limits and acceptable water quality in the Rock River that's dependent on a whole lot of factors. And whatever the DNR's methods are, they end up in this thing called a discharge permit. So this is what the first page of the city's discharge permit looks like. It's about 30 pages long. It has a number here. This is all public information. If you type that number into Google, you can find this in 2 minutes. You can read through this. But this document is issued every 5 years, and you're required to comply with the terms of this document. Otherwise, you are in violation. If you're in violation, there's things like penalties, fines, the city can get in trouble, there can be legal issues. Every city that has a treatment plant has a document like this, okay? And in Wisconsin, it's all on 5-year terms, with exceptions, I guess. So the project includes a lot of things. But in general, we have 4 new structures that are being built on the existing site, replacement or addition of what I call critical water treatment equipment, or things that are needed in order to meet what that document says. Utilities upgrades for water service, electrical service and controls, and bringing the current facility up to modern code standards. I mentioned before, your last major upgrade was in the 1980s. Code has changed, regulations have changed. There's a lot of things at the plant that would not meet the current code. So what we're going to do is fix that. So on the left here, all these pictures and slides we can zoom in and look at in finer detail at some point if that would be helpful. But I ask that you bear with me here. So on the left side, this is an aerial of the existing facility. So you've got the Public Works building up here, you have the baseball field here, and then here's the driveway on Jackson Street, okay? So this image on the right here, it's a little bit hard to see, but this is illustrating the scope of like what's gonna get removed from the highest level, okay? So the red is essentially all the asphalt, all the driveways, that's gonna get torn up during construction. It's gonna get removed, it's gonna be replaced by the end of it. And the blue shapes there are buildings that are gonna be removed. For one reason or another, you don't need them anymore, or they occupy space that we need for something else. So you've got this blue tank here. This is a digester that was originally built in the 1950s. It's just old, it's starting to fall apart. You have a unused clarifier tank here that the city really doesn't use for any part of their operations, and it occupies a space that could be useful for something else. You have a chemical building here, which is inconveniently located in the middle of the site, and we're gonna remove that. And then finally, there's this disinfection building down here, which is a unique structure that is essentially a series of channels that are in the ground. There's a building that sits on top of it. We'll be eliminating that. And in return, we will be adding some new buildings. I mentioned before, there's 4 new structures that are being built, and those are pointed out in yellow here. So this tank here is a new digester that's going to replace the function of the one that we removed over here. This one is bigger, It will give the city more capacity to store biosolids on site, which is important because you have to get rid of that every year. So if you have more volume on site, it allows you to be more efficient with your operations and have to remove it less often, which saves money. We have this structure here. So this is a series of 4 tanks. What I'll tell you about that is that it will improve biological treatment of wastewater and hopefully reduce the amount of chemicals you need to add, which is great because we always want to add less chemicals to water that ends up in our natural resources. We have this building down here, which we'll probably talk about a lot tonight. This is the expensive building. This has a 2-stage filtration process that is kind of one of the major drivers of this project. And it's because of that permit that I showed you before. The numbers that you have to meet for phosphorus in that permit are very low. Some of the lowest in the state. And in order to do that, we have to give you a process that can do that. And that is what's gonna go in here. And then finally, this large building here is what we're calling an operations building. But this is a living space area for the treatment plant staff and public works people. It's got a 4-bay garage. The back truck that they use for cleaning the city sewer system is going to go there. There's a new laboratory in there that will replace the outdated one that they have now. There's a conference room. I believe there's an intention to use this building as like an emergency response center for the city's needs. So there's a lot of reasons why this building is being built. Okay, and then we'll replace, like I said, the driveways to make this all work and have good traffic flow with it. So for the most part, other than these guys that are getting added here, the footprint of the facility is more or less staying the same that it is now. Okay. So I have just a couple photos here. So I mentioned that building with the phosphorus filters is very expensive. This is just kind of an image of what it looks like. This view here, we're looking at the east wall. This is probably on the order of like 80 by 55 feet. And it's 2 floors. So basically you would walk in on this first floor here into this big open room that has some tanks in it. There is a basement that has pumps and a lot of piping and valves in it. And you have 2 big filter cells here. So the filters look like this. They are 6-sided discs that have more or less carpet on them. And water will flow through the carpet and solid particles and phosphorus will get stuck on the surface of that. And clean water will flow through it. And at some point during operation, then the pumps that are in the basement here will turn on and clean these. Okay, so you have 2 of these in here. And then on this side here, there is a new ultraviolet disinfection system. So every year from May 1st to September 30th, you're required to disinfect your water before it goes into the Rock River because people use the river for recreational purposes. This is an improvement over your current process, which requires the use of chlorine. Okay. And then there's some other features of this building that you can't really see in here, but there's a chemical storage room that replaces the chemical building that's going away. You have an electrical room here. There's some generators that will replace the current generator that you have. And then just a couple other, oh yes, I want to point this out. So more or less a quarter of the project cost is tied up in this building. And we'll talk about cost during tonight's session. Just got more photos here. So the operations building, this is a rendering of it. Created in a computer, not necessarily going to look like this, but this is kind of giving you an idea of what the front of this building is going to look like. Here's our new digester here. It's going to be covered. A lot of plants have what they call anaerobic digesters. When you think of treatment plants, oftentimes you think of the smell of them. This is not an anaerobic digester. this is an aerobic digester, so we add air to the biosolids in here. And air is how you get rid of odors. So aerating this, having a cover on it, should keep those to a minimum. And then the pictures on the side here are some examples of things that we're replacing. I can show you 100 photos of what the existing plant looks like, but here this is a pump. This pump here is one of those things that has been around for 40 plus years and has done a great job. And here is an example of what we call a motor control center. So anything that has a big motor on it, for example, these pumps have, I think, 15 horsepower motors on them. The starters for those motors go in a cabinet like this. These things are pretty expensive, but they're very important. And in the case of this one that I'm pointing at here, it's 40 plus years old, and you can only get aftermarket parts for this. So generally, these things have like a 20-year lifespan. You've gotten almost double that at your facility. So why are we doing this? Why is the city investing money in upgrading the treatment plant if everything's worked well for 40 plus years? You're past the life cycle of your facility. As I mentioned, usually you go into a planning effort for a treatment plant expecting that you're going to get 20 years out of it. Okay, Steve mentioned that in 2023 we started doing a facilities plan for this. Prior to that, the last facilities plan was done probably prior to 1980. Okay, so that's already a big gap. But again, the idea is to replace things before they fail versus reacting to it after it has failed, because this is critical infrastructure. Those pumps that I showed, if those go down, there's no way to pass water through the facility. You experience sewer backups. We don't want that for a lot of reasons. And that's just one example of something that's critical that's needed. I mentioned this several times already now, but we're adding new processes to comply with regulations. A lot of these regulations didn't exist when the treatment plant was built. So it's not as easy as just, adding something new to what's there. You have to actually provide something totally new. And then it's to ensure that we're set up for the next 20 years. So one question that I've had to answer before is, well, something changed before, how do we know that nothing's gonna change again? You don't. But when we're doing these plans, we consult with the DNR and we get them to basically put in writing, this is what your limits are. This is what you're saying your conditions are gonna be 20 years from now, so here's what your limits will be. So we try and cover as many bases as possible. There's the permit again. So then some information down here. Steve mentioned it when he first started talking, but the city is going to utilize Clean Water Fund program to fund this project. So essentially what that is, it's a low interest rate loan that the state DNR offers to people in your situation who need to make a significant investment to upgrade their treatment facility, okay? What is this gonna cost? We have an idea, and you can see what that is in the third line there, but really, there's a lot of factors that will impact what that number actually is, which is why we're providing a range. It's driven by economic conditions, so we all know what's happening in the world today with inflation, all that stuff that I don't want to talk about, but prices have gone up. If you were doing this effort 10 years ago, it would probably be less than that. That's just the reality. Bidding climate's also important. We want to have contractors that bid on this. We don't want to put this out at an inconvenient time when everyone's busy and you only get one or two players that want to bid on it. The more interest there is, the more likely you are to get a good price for the project. How is it financed? Generally, these projects are financed by increasing sewer user rates. What is the rate increase going to be? That's dependent on what this number comes in, okay? That does not happen immediately. In many cases, it happens over a period of like 4 to 5 years, but it is a significant increase. And unfortunately, the reality is that any community that has a treatment plant, especially in Wisconsin, is going through something similar to this. If they haven't yet, they will, because these things only last 20 years, okay? So then what are the next steps for the project? So tonight's meeting, we're giving our final design update presentation. We don't have a physical copy of the plans and specifications here to show you. That's available if you'd like. Plan set is on the order of about 400 pages, and the spec books are like 3 binders that are like this thick. What we'll do, based on what happens tonight, is we'll submit those plans and specifications to the state agencies. So in order to be eligible for clean water funding next year, that has to be done by September 30th. We're only a week or so away from that, but submitting it a week early makes a big difference in terms of how fast it gets reviewed and how quick it can be turned around. So we submit it to the state DNR and then the Department of Safety and Professional Services. Then once that's done, we'll solicit bids from general contractors. So the plan would be, based on the schedule that we have now, that it would be made available to the public second week of October. And usually we like to bid that for 4 to 5 weeks to give people enough time to read through everything. Contractors have to assemble their teams and talk to a lot of suppliers to get pricing and all that stuff. There's a pre-bid meeting, which is essentially an open house and treatment plan for them to come, walk around, meet you guys, and ask questions. And then the actual bid would likely be in early November. So I mentioned timing before. We've seen historically that by bidding projects, especially of this size, at the onset of winter before the holidays come around, tend to be favorable for the community from a price standpoint because contractors haven't totally figured out their schedule for next year. Another thing that helps is giving them a lot of time to do the job. So think back to the first slide, we threw up a schedule there, and that was like 3 years of construction. That's a long schedule, but you're more likely to get somebody who's gonna do it in 3 years than if you say it has to be done in a year, right? That schedule takes into account the regulatory timelines that you're facing. And then finally, once the project is officially bid, which essentially I think it usually is at like 2 in the afternoon, but everybody comes and delivers their bid in a sealed envelope and the city opens them and reads them out loud. It's all public record. You have 60 days to award the project and tell the contractor, okay, we can proceed with construction. I will point out, just because you bid the project does not mean you have to award it. If for some reason the prices were to come back astronomically high, you have the opportunity to step back and reassess the situation. Okay, but I want to clarify that because oftentimes people say, well, we're bidding it, like it's over, like we have to do this. That's true, but it's not like that's the ultimate end. Okay. So tonight we're requesting that the council approve that we submit the required documentation to these regulatory agencies and to place the project out to bid. So what questions can I answer?
So I want to clarify one thing that Joe probably didn't quite mention. So a lot of the upgrades that we're doing, you kind of saw the map of how the buildings were to be built. So another thing I keep in mind is when we build something like this or when something is being implemented, you have to keep this existing treatment plant in function so that you're treating. So a lot of the upgrade costs come in trying to play around. How do we keep the plant operating and treating to get it to get the upgrade complete? So it's not just as simple as building a brand new treatment plant.
Putting out 100 porta potties for a while, right?
We'll gotta go somewhere, right?
Yeah.
But with that, I guess I'll take any questions. Yes.
Are we currently being fined for not being in compliance with the DNR regulations?
So,
And if we are, how much is that?
That's a really good question. So currently, we do not meet for phosphorus or permit requirements, but we have an MDV. So what that does is allows a variance in what the permit value is, and we pay a portion on top of it, which is calculated out. So we basically have to run our phosphorus as low as we can to get the lowest dollar amount on the MDB. That runs out January 1st of 2028. So that's kind of the rush for this. I mean, we're a couple of years into this already to get just to this point, and then we're looking at a couple of years of construction. So we are really up against a pretty tight deadline to make that happen.
Let me add one thing to that. So I didn't make this totally clear before, but when you get a new limit, it's not like they give it to you and you have to meet it tomorrow. They give you a schedule in here to meet it, and that schedule can be years. So right now you have to do it, but you're not out of compliance yet.
So how much is it in comparison to the new building?
It's totally,
Because we're not allowed to let the phosphorus in, we got too much.
Yeah, so
How
we're.
much is the fine, or what? do we
So I believe what I've been told, and like by some DNR representation in the past, is you can be fined up to $10,000 a day.
pay? Oh, okay.
That's
a good point to bring up, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know what, it would depend, like if for some reason construction would go along, I would hope that the DNR would say, hey, we understand that they're making the right steps and they would forgo that and we could just pay the MDB cost that we currently have, but that MDB does run out January 1st of 2020.
What's the cost of this? What did you call it, an MVP?
MDB, so it's a variance for how much phosphorus, we can discharge more phosphorus than what our permit allows for right now.
And how much is that? How much is that?
It varies, because it depends how much you're charged per pound that you discharge. So there's not really like a straightforward answer, but it's a significant amount of money. And with the new permit that we got last year, our limits have gone down on that MDB. So they did reissue with our permit, but the limits are less. So we are spending more in chemical treatment and more on the MDB cost because the prices went up on both ends of that.
The MDB since we have to apply for it,
Yeah.
passed.
And we've gone to the extent here where we've really tried to do some very long-term forecasting so that we can run each month to the optimal, how much chemical we're using versus how much we're paying on the MDB. So we're trying to hang at a target that puts us in the best spot financially.
See, in Green Bay, Fort Howard paper mill, if the Fox River in Green Bay is severely polluted with PCB. And they're saying that it's pretty clean now. But Fort Howard paper mill pays a certain amount every year to let a certain percentage of their contaminant back into the river. So ultimately, they're never gonna clean that river up entirely. And I was just wondering if our situation would be something like that also. Because they're actually violating, but the DNR allows them a small percentage to, you know what I'm saying? And my point is, are the facilities that are around the country here, are they set on kind of the same standards? No, we gotta be, that water has to be drinkable when it leaves the facility.
well, with the phosphorus specifically, it's the concern is like algae and, excessive nutrients and the potential harms of that for humans. So I can't speak on the one in Green Bay. I don't have experience with that, but as far as phosphorus goes, I haven't seen anybody, able to fight with the DNR.
And Fort Howard paper mill runs without a Green Bay, so they get, alleviated.
Sure.
Cost, but they still are polluting.
Yeah,
It's just, it was a question, that's not for or against anything, I just wanted to ask. So 10 grand a day, that's.
I don't, I've just told that years ago that they have the ability to go
That's
to
a lot
that.
of money.
yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of legal stuff that comes along with that too, and lawyers, so I mean,
Yeah,
I haven't ever gone through that, right, I'm just saying that.
I know you get referred to the DOJ, and then the DOJ comes up with the punishment. We had a little experience with that with a force main years ago that leaked.
Thank you.
I'll go, I guess, nobody else. Is phosphorus the only upgrade change we're making to the plant? Or are there other treatment processes we are upgrading? I mean, I know phosphorus is the number one.
Yeah, it's a big one. You also have to meet ammonia, so nitrogen. Right now you do a great job of meeting that, but that's a factor in this. Another one is biosolids, right? So we didn't really talk about that in the presentation, but all the way that water is treated is essentially there's bacteria that live in these tanks and eat nasty stuff in the water, right? So you have to manage the bacteria. That's what these guys do. And part of that involves getting rid of some of the bacteria because you can't just let it grow infinitely, right? So it's called wasting. And when you waste, you send it to a tank to aerate it and stabilize it. Once it's in here, it gets pumped out into a machine that sits on the second floor of this building. That machine turns it, they call it cake, which is kind of gross. It's not actually cake, but it looks like, dirt, basically, right? And that then gets stored in one of these two barns here, and it gets hauled out and put on fields, right? Not fields for human consumption, but livestock, right? That's a big problem in the country right now, is PFAS and what does it contain in biosolids, and should we actually be putting that stuff on farmland, right? So part of what we're doing on the project is to make it so that this process of thickening sludge, storing it, and disposing it is more efficient, to make it so that you have to use less chemicals, less water, less electricity to do that. And hopefully improve the quality of it so that it's easier to apply it on fields and get rid of it. If you can't put it on fields, it's very expensive to get rid of it. You may have heard of communities in the state putting these things in called dryers. Dryers is something that, would have been great to put in. The problem is that they cost an insane amount of money, not just to buy, but to run and heat it. That would be the best thing to do for it, but we made the decision to try and make this more efficient than put all the eggs in that basket and add more cost to what the project already is. So it's focusing on everything, but.
Well, there's more process than just phosphorus, but I know the number one thing with the DNR is phosphorus. To that degree, what is our current number and what is the number you have to achieve? Because it's that, which is ridiculous considering they hammer point of use and every non-point of use that they don't wish to monitor does 100 times more damage than this does. That's not your fault, it's the DNR. And then I guess to that second part is what were the options and how did you come to this treatment process as being the right and for cost, for longevity, and process for Horicon to have?
Yeah.
Horicon put in, we get big greenhouses and are doing algae. Beaver Dam's done different processes. They've also got a contract with Kraft.
Yeah.
To pay for a big part of their upgrades.
Are you familiar with the Wuhan facility? Okay, so I wish I have the numbers in a different slide that I can give you. So your limit is different based on the month of the year, okay? Right now, what is your MDB, like 0.6?
Yeah, somewhere right around there, right?
So 0.6 milligrams per liter, okay? In the winter, so like December, January, February, March, your limit is like 0.25 milligrams per liter or thereabouts. It's based on your flow. So the more flow that you have going through the facility, the lower your limit is, right? That is probably meetable without something like this. When we get to August and September, those are the two bad months. You have to get below 0.075. So like if you go and get like discharge permits, a lot of times you see 0.075 milligrams per liter as a 6-month average. That's like typically been the lowest one. You guys are below that for 2 months, based on what the flow that normally goes through your facility is. That's why we're doing this. If that number was higher, you probably would only need to do it through one filter. We arrived at this filter in series process, that's what we call it, filtration in series, because it goes through these 3 tanks, it goes through filter 1, and then goes through filter 2. It started as an idea, because we said, hey, we don't think we can hit this with 1 filter, so what about 2? And then we tested it. Last year, we did a 5-week pilot at the facility. We went around and we looked at a couple examples. We went to Sun Prairie. They have a different type of filter process, but they do the same type of thing. We went and saw this one in Saukville, up north of Milwaukee. They have this one there. And we tested it, and we found that we were able to meet the low limits with the 2 filters in series. There's other processes out there, right? You can have the greenhouse one. You can do water quality trading. There's other types of filters that exist that use like sand or synthetic media. But this was selected based kind of on like the ease of operation of it. Maybe you guys can speak on that.
I could go back to like the Strand, when we did the first phosphorus study with Strand, and we looked at putting in the phosphorus analyzer. We went through all of that. We didn't leave any stone unturned, because during that we had tested for biological phosphorus removal, which would allow us to go down a bunch of different avenues. We went back through that again. We bench tested that again. I know you guys did some modeling behind the scenes. None of that seemed to model out or work all of it. So we were kind of left going down one avenue with, limited options, I guess.
Yeah, so to say it again, because the numbers are so low, there's limited examples of technology that are out there that we know for certain can do it. So that's why we tested this. And if the pilot test was unsuccessful, we would have had to pivot and look at something else. I don't know what that would have been, but we did get encouraging results from it. Now, what that means though, is that we really only have to run this thing super well and dialed in for like 2 months out of the year. And the other months, you will save money by, cutting back on the operation of this, so that when your limit is higher, you're not adding, gallons and gallons of chemical in order to get this thing to work, because you have to do that.
One other like kind of happy accident to this whole thing is that these filters also do remove microplastics. So if any kind of limitation would come up with that, we're actually already removing them, and they help out our UV system by removing a lot of the flocculation that would be in the water, or turbidity that would block the light, so the intensity would be able to be run less and more efficient.
Well, that's a good thing.
The water that will come out of this building will be very clean. Probably some of the cleanest wastewater effluent in the state.
So these new, like dishwater soaps and detergents and all that, does that affect the phosphorus content? Or are they?
It can. I know that
And is there an additive that we could combat that, new products that are on the market?
Yeah, so when you first get smacked with the phosphorus, and the first thing they ask you to do before you do anything even close to this is to evaluate sources in your collection system of it. So like car washes, soaps are a culprit of it. My experience is that a lot of soap products, there's still phosphorus-based soaps, but a lot of them have moved away from having phosphorus as like a chemical component of it. And unfortunately, the reality is, despite that, it's present in, human waste. So even if you eliminate that, you're still going to have to deal with the problem.
Thanks.
Now the filters are going to remove phosphorus, plastics and others, and you talked about it flushing with water. Where does that go? What is the treatment? And do you just keep recycling it and taking it out each time, or is the byproduct of the filters got another process, and where's that going? How does-
Yeah, great question. So normally, this tank has water covering the filters, right? So how the system knows to backwash is when the water rises to a certain point, it flips a switch, pumps turn on, clean the filters, the water level drops. So where does that go? Right? Because that has all the stuff that we just removed. That goes back to the head of the plant.
So it does recirculate.
So it recirculates and it eventually ends up in the sludge. Now, I have answered this question for several people, so I'll just give it here. If it's ending up in the sludge and we're just putting it in the field, what benefit does that have? I don't have a great answer for that, but what the DNR sees is that it's better to go on the fields than it is to go directly into the river. And the idea is that if biosolid is incorporated well on the field, it doesn't end up in the surface water, it ends up in the groundwater. And there are no standards for phosphorus in groundwater, just surface water, because you're not going to have algae and eutrophication happening below the surface. You have that on surface water when sunlight hits it.
This one's probably more for Cody, but.
Yeah.
So the end product is the cake, the sludge. I know you were, a couple of years ago, wall logos indicated they weren't much interested. I think you still had them this year.
Yeah.
Do you have long-term belief of a hauler for the sludge cake and a place to put it?
Yes,
In the
so,
future?
but, so
With
this
this process, we gotta have a place to go with
Yeah.
it, but that is a piece of this as well if we don't have a
yeah.
provider
So-
to deal with it.
So Larry Walvogel retired, Noah, do you remember, was it 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah,
So,
somewhere late 2018.
Sabo Mechanical out of Fond du Lac bought out the program and they are continuing it on. So they're doing the same thing with requiring the fields, doing the testing, and then disposing of it. So once it leaves our plant, it's in Sabo's hands.
Okay.
And knowing they're a long-term company, I feel comfortable that they will.
They have
We'll be
places to take it.
Yep. And with that, when Larry retired, I know Noah and I went through, we did a lot of work, and we got pre-approved for United Liquid Waste Haulers, so we can haul both cake and liquid to them. We did, obviously, the new Sabo, and I believe there was another one too that we had found that we had approved multiple. So if we ran into an issue mid-season, no issue at all, we could just switch over because we're already pre-approved through the DNR for hauling to different locations. And with United, they take it to their central like collection facility. They mix it and then they retest and apply it wherever, so that once it's at that facility, it's done with us anyway, which they've been long-term too, so. Oh, it was the landfill. We approved just in case that we ever had to go to the landfill. So I guess with that money, people out there, I just don't foresee an issue, but you never guarantee.
Will residential plumbing be impacted? Like, we just had new plumbing put in by our place a couple of years ago. Will there be any impact on the residential discharge plumbing going?
I don't believe so. I mean, most of the construction is going to be within the property of the treatment plant.
Thank you.
We do have a new water line that's gonna go north here by the baseball diamond, but we're gonna directional drill that so we don't disturb the field. But yeah, no, there shouldn't be any impacts to, private infrastructure.
I'll throw one last one out there. Per terms of, this plant has exceeded its capacity. I mean, it's exceeding its limits on its permit. I do not believe that it's exceeded its capacity. Where does this new design and plant leave us for future growth in capacity?
Yeah, so when you do your facilities plan, you have to look at population projections from the residential side and also commercial industry, right? So when we talk about capacity, there's different definitions. There's hydraulic capacity, so that's just the amount of water that goes through it. But then you have pollutant capacity, so organic material, solids, phosphorus. There's like a definition for all of those that we say this plant has capacity for, I'm just using, garbage numbers here, 1,000 pounds per day BOD, 500 pounds per day phosphorus, okay? It's not that high. What this is doing is giving you more capacity. From a hydraulic standpoint, we look at not only the average day, but also the peak. So I would say that that is increasing by about 20%, which is based again on the projections that we do. We don't just blindly say we're gonna add this much capacity. There's rationale behind determining that. From the pollutant side of it, you're adding a lot of capacity. I don't have an exact number for you, but like, you will be able, your plant is underloaded from like the organic standpoint right now. So I'm not gonna say a dairy can come in here and start using this facility, but like, you have capacity to take on more users after this upgrade. It's not like you're just gonna do this and then it's like, okay, we're already full again. That's not how these go.
We also carved out locations within this plan for extra clarifier, splitter box, and with the addition of the selector basins, which is the upper left-hand corner on the ditch, that actually sets us up for future very nicely. Like if we need increased either hydraulic or pollutant capacity, we can add that on fairly simply in the future.
Same with these guys. We're designing this so that you can add more discs in the future if needed, rather than making the building bigger. That was a decision made early on, is that building can't get bigger because the cost would be like an exponential increase to do that.
If we do come in, under the budget that it says there, have you guys considered the individual residential impact on taxes? I think you mentioned the DNR might go something on it, but what will the individual residents of Horicon, have you calculated anything like that yet on the projected price we have? I know everything's up in the air, but.
So we had another meeting on this week with Ehlers, who helps us calculate these rates out. And the problem is, we don't know until the project's closed. We don't know what grant funding we're getting. We don't know the commercial adjustments, because this is, like Stephen brought up, it's more phosphorus driven. We'll look at that at the end and probably see like a higher impact to like a larger phosphorus user, or somebody that discharges more phosphorus to us. So it's really hard to say what it would be on a residential versus a commercial, because there's so many moving parts to this. What I would like to see is to go through and do some small rate increases going up to this. And I would, based on what we talked with the funding people, and this is not a guarantee, we would hope to have a resolution in effect in 2029 that would run it out for another 2 or 3 years potentially, and get us to the end with the loan.
I know there's a lot of variables, we realize that, but we do have a hard figure on there to kind of shoot around. Shoot at. And I just was wondering if anybody applied that to individual taxation. But,
Well, it all goes to your water bill. It'll all be part of your water bill.
but
It won't
what's
go
the,
to taxes.
did you figure out the cost about with that figure on the board? Not that that's in concrete, a lot of variables, I understand that, but.
Yeah, but
So what are we
until,
looking at, you know, I mean,
I honestly,
that's gonna be a question that,
I know, and that's the biggest question, and I know Mayor can attest to this too. We've tried to get that, but it
that's
is
fine.
such
We just.
a movable number. I think after it's bid out and we have a concrete number on a bid, that is something we can go through, and we're gonna probably, hopefully enter back into a contract with Ehlers and spend the next year figuring some of that out. Because it is a long drawn out process to calculate that.
The one thing we don't want to do is put it all and do the entire increase at once. Ideally, we wanted to start this process of the slow increases last year already. Didn't happen. So starting, this year, start doing the small increments so we don't have to take that big hit, like Maple went up 60% in 1 year. Thresa was up over 100.
Yeah, Thresa.
Yeah, Thresa got a lot worse than Maple. So we're trying to do it so we can set them up in small increments
So it's-
until the completion of the plant.
Well, you're scaring me, big impact and Maple had a heavy hit or whatever.
Yeah.
And people are gonna ask, okay, not that I'm trying to be argumentative.
Well, and we do know that because we all live here too. So we're just, until we get that bid in, it's hard for even us to project. We projected some numbers at the max but we'll probably, the bids should come in below the max.
We'll get prepared, because there's a
Yeah.
lot of poor people in town, so.
Yeah.
We're gonna wonder what the hell the impact is.
And it's unfortunate, but you're not alone. I mean, you look at anything from Leroy, Kikoski, Mayville, Juneau, Burnett, every single community, Iron Ridge, they've all had this impact or have it coming. Because of these regulations, we're all affected the same way.
Not real satisfying, but I know there's a lot of variables, so.
I guess like when we went to MSA, like from the city, like the employee standpoint, like we wanted to build another plant. We didn't want to overspend. We wanted a good, solid plant that would last hopefully another 30 plus years. That's what we asked for. Now, MSA won't be able to guarantee us that because they wouldn't be doing their job if they did, because there's no manufacturer, anyone that would guarantee this. We wanted to make sure that we had capacity for not only hydraulically, but for pollutants. Wanted to make sure that the site plan had stuff carved out so we don't end up demolishing buildings that are in the way so we can't do what we need to do for upgrades. We went as far as, they were very helpful in getting, MSA really worked with us on this one. We're not even doing grit removal, like a process for that. We're gonna be doing that in our selector basins and our ditch. That was millions of dollars. We tried to do this as cost effective with fixing the issues. We were replacing all the piping and all the electrical because obviously they are way past their lifetime and we're seeing a lot of failures. So that from our aspect, we didn't want anything over the top. We didn't want any fluff. We just want a good solid plant that we can bring out to the residents here.
I would say like probably a good 20% of the project is the electrical cabinets and wiring and conduit and controls. That cost has gone up a lot in the past 5
That
years.
sounds like you guys did a pretty comprehensive study. That sounds pretty good.
How much did you add for additional growth to work on?
Yep, that's what we were talking. We did add another spot. There's a spot there for a selector basin and another clarifier, which would allow us to go even higher in capacity. But with our growth projections for the next 20 years, this plant will cover that in pollutants as well as both, as long as we stay on the projection.
You think Mr. Mayor will be allowed to segment the payments on the taxes?
That's exactly what we're trying to do.
Hopefully.
And it's gonna, like I said, Mike, it's gonna be, the payments or the upgrades is gonna be on your tax bill. It's gonna be on your monthly utility bill.
Okay.
So your taxes, this won't affect your taxes, this is gonna affect the utilities. And one of the things we've kind of directed here is that when we get that number, we get that bid, we do something like this again, where we can also put up on the screen, and I know I've said it to these guys countless times, they're annoyed with it, but I want to see a list of what our neighbors are paying too. And while some of them, we pay per 1,000 gallons, some do it per 100 cubic feet. It's an easy conversion, anyone, they can do it. We don't have to try to do it in our head. And we'll see where we are at with our neighbors for all of them. And then we're not gonna hide how much it costs, because everyone in here has to pay the dams.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is that projected cost, is that the maximum amount that you're looking at? That you're, the 2032, is that the maximum amount that you're looking at?
I always like to think that our cost estimates are conservative and that we're gonna come in higher than the contractor will. But
Because Port Washington, their initial bid, like in 2023, was like 18 million, and when the project was finished, it was 21.
yeah, I mean, that's not uncommon that happens, because these projects take years to design and plan. And you start with one number in mind and then, something crazy in the world
But I mean,
happens.
is 32, is that the maximum?
I hope so.
Unfortunately, we're gonna have to get wrapped up so we can get switched over for council in 5 minutes, so.
Does anyone have any other quick questions for MSA? Otherwise, you can always reach out to me, Cody, or anybody else.
Thanks for the presentation.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and as more impacts or, costs and stuff comes available, we'll obviously have more meetings.